Welcome back, everybody. So in this video, I want to uh, wish you a Happy New Year. First off, that's, that's the first thing. Happy 21. Thank God 2020 is over with, and hopefully we can all move on. But this video is spurned by a comment on one of my most recent videos from Olo Vorgo. Saying we need more how to survive 2021 tutorials, which cracked me up. So thanks for the comment, and I hear you. I mean, I think that ultimately 2021 is going to be better. I think that 2020 has been a rough year, and it's pretty unlikely that 2021 is going to be as bad as 2020. But the moment that the clock strikes midnight and we switch over to 2021, that doesn't mean that we get a reset, right? This isn't, everything's back to normal and fantastic immediately. The economy is still, recessed, right? I guess. A lot of people are having a really, really tough time. So I thought I would talk about this a little bit. And the first thing is, when you're going through a hard time, when we're in a situation where things are dire, things are bad, you're dealing with maybe sick family members, maybe you're sick yourself, maybe you're recovering from COVID, you're a long hauler, maybe you're just having a tough time because you're isolated and you're not seeing other people, whatever it is, right? One of the things that we can do is we can look at those who have come before us and who have gone through adversity and come out the other side better, right? Or better than average, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to point you to some other people who know a heck of a lot more than me. Starting off with Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl, if you're not familiar, wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. So there's a couple different variations of this. There's Man's Search for Meaning, a introduction to logotherapy. I don't know the difference between that version of the book and the one that I've come across, which is just Man's Search for Meaning. But this is a good book to look at during times of adversity. If you're not familiar with Viktor Frankl, Viktor Frankl was a German Jew who survived the Holocaust. And he was a German Jew who was a psychologist or psychiatrist, I forget, by trade. So he was in the camps, and he basically documented the events of surviving through this horror from a perspective of a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, and basically documented who was able to survive and who didn't. And basically what it boiled down to was people who had some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose in their life were able to survive any adversity, more or less, because they felt they had a reason to do so. The people who didn't, they didn't have the motivation to keep fighting through this horrible ordeal. It's not a universal, but those were the observations that he made. And the search for meaning is trying to find what is your higher purpose, what is your meaning for existing, right? And for some people that may be religion, For other people, that might be their children. For some people, that might be making a difference in the world. But I think that's something that we can look to right now, and it's a book recommendation that I would make, for this upcoming year, and it really is something that's going to apply to you, really no matter where you are in your life, because there's always going to be times of adversity, right? We could be in the best economy in the world, and you have a death in the family, right? That's going to be a trial. That is going to be a difficult time for you, even though the world at large might be doing well. So I think this is a really good book to read. But I also think that the other thing that I want to point out is um, this is the page that I'm pointing to is the library, right? So this is the Los Angeles Public Library. Obviously, I live in Los Angeles. It's going to vary depending on where you are. But don't forget that the library exists, right? They're still open. They're still available. You can get books. A lot of them do ebook delivery, which is typically what I do now. You can do this with other forms of media as well, so movies, videos, things like that, and that's a really good way to consume media during this time, right? So much of what we do is looking at Netflix or Amazon Video or online streaming, YouTube, things like that. And as much as I have a channel on YouTube, and I love YouTube, and I will happily fall into a YouTube rabbit hole from time to time on everything from British narrowboats to OS internals videos and all sorts of weird stuff. And I think we all love and enjoy that. These algorithms are not necessarily great for us. It's one of the reasons why, and I should probably put this back up here. One of the reasons why I make sure that my videos are also syndicated on library. I like the fact that it's open source, it's peer to peer, it's distributed. I think that's a good thing. But also, it doesn't have the same kind of algorithm that's trying to get you sucked into this. The library doesn't either. You can get a book, you can read it, you're good. You can borrow a DVD or a digital download of a movie, you watch it, you're good. So, try to consume media in a way that's healthy for you during this time as well, and consume stuff that's going to help you, that's going to make you better, right? So that's the first thing I would recommend is look to people who've been through this before us. It's also useful to go look for people who survived things or are gone through things. So Shackleton is another guy who you may have heard of. Well, I'm spelling that wrong, I imagine. But Shackleton, Ernest Shackleton, I believe, was a British adventurer, basically, who was going to the North Pole. They were isolated. They had to go through this massive ordeal to get back to England, and most of the people there, on the journey died, unfortunately. But reading about people overcoming things, I think is useful and helpful. But there's a ton of information that you can find on the library. Books on programming, books on operating systems, things like that. So the next thing I want to talk about is just sort of getting yourself a good solid foundation to kind of work with, and that basically comes down to your health, right? Right. So this comes down to your physical health and your mental health. So you want to have some kind of regime that you do to try to make sure that you have good physical and mental health. So that comes down to trying to eat right as much as you can. That comes down to trying to get some exercise every day. Even if you don't feel like it, just go for a walk, get outside, get some vitamin D, wear a mask, but do all that kind of stuff. when it comes to mental health, I think it makes a huge amount of sense to kind of think about, like, what do you want to do? What are the things that you're going to be doing in the event that you get down, right? Because I think that most of us during the pandemic, at some point or another, have experienced some form of depression. May have been grief, may have been loss, but I think most of us have felt some kind of depression from being isolated. It may be worse, especially if you've lost your job, if you have additional stresses, if you're worried about money, all these kind of things. So, like, literally make a list of stuff that you can do that's helpful, right? So there may be some overlap. Things like going for a walk may be useful. Personally, I find mindfulness to be very, very useful. If you're not familiar with mindfulness stuff already, it's not like spiritually new agey nonsensey stuff. It's brass taxes, concrete things that you can go ahead and do in order to sort of help you focus on the moment. I grew up with things like meditation, and so it was something that I was already a little bit familiar with. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, for example, you're feeling really stressed out, doing things like taking a physical inventory of your body, starting with your feet. Do my feet feel cold? Can I feel the texture of my socks? And working your way up from your feet to the top of your head. Sounds weird, but the idea is that if you have a lot of thoughts that are causing anxiety or stress or things like that, you're basically creating a race condition effectively, where you're trying to go preempt those thoughts to give yourself space in order to go ahead and just separate yourself for a minute, break out of the loop of sort of negative thinking, things like that. So that can be very, very useful. If you're outside, I find being outside is very helpful for this kind of thing. Noticing the direction of the wind, just trying to feel what direction the wind is coming from. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. I sail, so that's something that I kind of do as a habit anyway. I try to be aware of the direction that the wind is coming from, but that's a useful thing that you can pay attention to. Looking at the number of leaves on a tree and like literally counting them, stuff like that can be very, very helpful. But again, these are all things that you can go read up on. Is go to your local library or go to their website and look into things like mindfulness. There's a lot of great services that are available if you are having a hard time. Things like BetterHelp. And I'm sure that if you've listened to any podcast in recent years, you're probably familiar with BetterHelp. They're all over the place, but I vouch for them. I use them. I find them to be pretty good. My mother and both of my sisters are psychologists, so I think that even if you don't have issues with things like anxiety or depression, I think everybody should be doing therapy at least a couple times a year anyway, just as sort of a check-in, similar to how you would take your car in for an oil check. That's a good idea. So, focus on the mental health piece of this, and make a list. It may just be, get more exercise. That may be the thing that you do when you get stressed out. It may be reach out to friends, right? Things along those lines. And then once we have our baseline, or the base that we can go use to kind of build on set, now we can go look at trying to do more stuff, right? So we can start looking at trying to go ahead and figure out how to go work on career prospects or financial or things like that. So the first thing I always turn to when it comes to looking for potential job prospects is skills. Right, skills are key. There's no reason for anyone to hire you if you don't have skills that you can provide for them. So what you want to do is you want to go look at the marketplace and try to go figure out what do people need, and then what skills do you have that you can offer those people that fit into those needs, or what skills do you need to acquire, right? So pretty simple. So if you're looking for work, there are still lots of jobs out there for people, who are going to be working in like DevOps or coding or things like that, right? Those jobs are out there. So you know look around, look at what jobs do exist, look at where you're at. Are you qualified for those jobs? And then try to go figure out what do you need to go do to go from where you are to be able to go meet those qualifications. Now, one of the things that somebody asked in a recent video or mentioned in a recent video is the issue of all jobs requiring experience, right? So this is something I've talked about in another video. I'll see if maybe I can link it at the end of this one. But projects are incredibly helpful for this because projects are things that you can go do to create experience for yourself. So, setting up a DNS server, setting up a web server, setting up, Synapse for a matrix server, whatever it is, right? Doing all these things can help you. You can also go ahead and do things like volunteer. Right? Volunteering can be a great way to go ahead and get experience. But the other one, and the one that I specifically talk about in one of my previous videos that I think is really useful, if you want to go back and look at it, I think I called it the secret to getting experience without experience or something like that. The idea is it's sort of like a Zen koan almost. It doesn't really feel like it makes sense, but that's to hire yourself. And what I mean by that is do consulting, right? So especially right now, with so many people having been laid off, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of people out there who are trying to get a side hustle up and running, right? So they're going to go sell their gluten-free cookies. They're going to, try to do graphic design. They're going to be whatever it is, right? And all of those people probably need help with IT stuff, right? So it could be setting up a website. It could be having them, configure a VPN, getting things like Zoom configured. Some stuff that a lot of us who are more technical don't even really consider, because to us, these are just obvious things that of course anybody can do. Not necessarily, right? Well, if you go post on Facebook, right, and or whatever social media you use, and I don't love social media, but it does have its time and place. What you'd want to go do is you'd want to go on your social media, reach out to your friend circle, however you go do that, and you say, I'm going to do free websites, or I'm going to do free tech help. If anybody needs help setting up things like VPNs, if anybody needs help with whatever it is that you want to help people with, right? Setting up a web server, whatever it is, right? You put it out there that you're willing to help. You are starting to do IT consulting, and you want to do a few projects to be able to put on a resume and have people vouch for you, and then you help those people, right? You don't keep doing this, but you do this for a short period of time where you get a couple different projects, and then you get a quote from them, you get a recommendation from them, you have them write a recommendation for you on LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff, and you put that on your resume. And what you do is you then start charging, right? So you reach out to those people and you say, do you know anybody else who needs help? I'm going to be charging, but I'm going to not be charging very much money. Be very, very inexpensive initially. And then you're going to get some work because you're going to be doing this for cheap. This is at the ridiculous end of things, and this is probably not where I would start, but Even if somebody knew how to go set up a website, if you offered to do it for $5, they'd probably say yes. And the reason why is because it's cheaper to hire you to set up the website than it is for them to invest their own time, generally speaking. And that's normally going to be sort of a truism, right? So if you can set up something really easily, set up somebody with like a web server for like $20, right? If you can do that in 15, 20 minutes, because it's literally just spitting up an instance on DigitalOcean and installing Apache or whatever it is, uploading their website to it, or Squarespace or whatever it is, most people will go for that, right? So now you can put on your resume that you've been doing consulting, right? And the idea is, even if it starts out fairly simple, what you want to do is you want to keep track of all the people that you help, and then every single time you do work for somebody or you help someone, you ask them, who else do you know who might need my services? Do you have anybody else that I can contact? And they may be hesitant to give it to you, but if you're if you're good and you're cheap, a lot of times you're not going to need to be the person who reaches out to other people. They're going to be giving your name to other people as well. And then the idea is, as soon as you have enough work that you're busy, you raise your rates, right? So you raise your rates. That's going to drop off some people, but it's going to bring on some new business. And then you can just raise your rates, hopefully to the point where you are getting a livable wage, or at least getting some income. And don't get caught up on a lot of the logistical stuff. Don't worry about setting up an LLC, and don't worry about getting, business cards, and don't worry about all the kind of logistic stuff. Go back and fix that once you have some success, right? So like, you don't need to talk to an accountant or a lawyer or anything like that before this. You just get it going, and then you're dealing with such small amounts of money that it's not, even if you get burned, it's not going to be a big deal, right? Later on, if you start making enough money off of this, then you can talk to legal counsel and get your accountant and all that kind of stuff, and get your liability insurance and on all those kind of things that you would want to go do to get legit. But in the interim, you're building experience, right? So you can volunteer, you can hire yourself, you can do projects. Another big one that is incredibly useful, and it's always surprising me that more people don't do this, is if you just go to like GitHub and then you go click on like explore, you can go look at all sorts of different projects, right? So let's go click on trending, for example, right? We could go ahead and see all of these different projects that are here, right? Well, scroll through this, find one that seems interesting to you. I mean, obviously one that you have some skills with, right? And then volunteer to do some work on it, right? If you're not sure exactly what it is, like what you can go do, here's something that anyone can go do. If we just do a search for like, well, actually I can just do OpenSUSE.org, right? You see that we have the OpenSUSE thing come up here. We can go click on contribute, and then they're going to have contribute to OpenSUSE. Do you want to do code? Do you want to do hardware? Design stuff, conferences. I'll tell you one thing that they always need, documentation, right? And if you don't like OpenSUSE, pick a different distro. So you go to freebsd.org, right? If you go to documentation, there is a porter's handbook. There's a developer's handbook that give you great resources for this. You can go get involved in this really easily. Contact the foundation about writing things like documentation, or volunteering in a bunch of different ways. whatever it is, find some kind of project and contribute to it. And, if you're the person who's maintaining a port on FreeBSD, a lot of times it's just like compiling it, checking to see if there's any errors, tracking down the error, right? Fixing it, and then, contributing the fix. That's something that's pretty doable, even for people who are fairly junior. You could, put that on the resume, right? So that's experience without being hired, right? You're volunteering. Another thing that you can go do is go on Meetup, right? So a lot of groups are doing virtual events, right? So let's say, for example, you want to be a DBA, right? So if I do a search for DBA and I search for Los Angeles, right? Or maybe databases probably be a better one. Whoops. All right, so you can see that there's a bunch of different events here that they have. Now, you'll see a lot of these where they have like 5 days developing SQL databases. This is probably pay, right? So this is probably somebody who wants to charge for this. Yeah, so this is the $3,000 course. So this is a little bit of a different kind of situation, right? So what I would do is I would look for free ones, right? And again, open source stuff is probably going to be useful. So if we search for like, Postgres. Yeah. So there's looks like there's no Postgres group. Let me go double check my spelling on this because I feel like I always spell Postgres wrong. All right, Postgres SQL. So that might have been let me go back over here and try this again. Okay. So there's some Postgres stuff that you can go find. It looks like there's none in Los Angeles. So if I wanted to be a Postgres DBA, what I might do is go over here to start a new local or start a new group and click on that. And it costs like $15 a month to host a Postgres group, right? Or whatever group you want. They don't have pricing specific for Postgres. But I would start a group. And then I would host a meeting once a month or once a week or however you want to go do it. I'd make attendance free. And then now you're the person who runs the Los Angeles Postgres users group. And guess what? You're going to meet some Postgres people through that. And that's going to be good networking. So, try to go do stuff like that. Sign up to give talks. That's one of the first things that I did that really, really helped me in my career. Now, granted, I was fairly established at this point already, but I signed up to give a couple of different talks for the Unix User Association of Southern California. And I did them on topics that I wasn't super familiar with, right? So for one of them, I wanted to implement an intrusion detection system in my environment anyway. So that was something I had on the sort of docket of things to do. So what I did is I volunteered to give a talk on Snort, which was an open source intrusion detection system. And basically what that meant was I was now under the gun. I had now committed to learning that technology well enough that I could talk about it as an authority by a certain date. Now that puts a lot of pressure on you, especially if you haven't done any public speaking before. And the first time I did that, I was just sweating bullets and so nervous. But I gave a talk, and what ended up happening from that was people got to know me, and they said, "Oh, this guy knows a lot about information security stuff and things along those lines." And I didn't love the process. I was in fact, I really disliked it. I hated it, but I felt like I got through it, and I felt a huge sense of accomplishment afterwards because it was a difficult thing to go do. So I signed up for another one, and I said, "All right, well, I'm going to go do one on external penetration testing." Right. So I gave a talk on Nessus. And that's really where it kind of, unbeknownst to me, but planted a seed that changed the trajectory of my career, where I gave that talk on Nessus, a few months later on. And actually, I think it happened in the reverse order. I gave the Nessus talk first, and I gave the Snort talk second. But either way, um, on my second talk, I had somebody drive down to attend the talk from San Francisco all the way to Los Angeles to come attend the talk. And they did so because they wanted to thank me. So they had come to the Nessus talk, the first one that I had given on external penetration testing, and they had interviewed for a new job a week or two after that, and just randomly, the person asked, hey, do you have any experience with external penetration testing? And the person was like, well, I mean, I know Nessus a little bit. I just went to a talk on it the other day, and then they talked about Nessus, and because of that, the guy gave him the job. And the feeling that I got from that was so positive, was such a good feeling, that later on, when the opportunity to teach came up, so I think I've talked about this in some of my earlier videos, but just in case any of you guys haven't seen those, the way I started teaching was that I was working at Microsoft. I basically had somebody else's dream job, and had worked at a startup. We had been acquired, was making tons of money, had great qualifications on paper, worked in the same building as Bill Gates. My boss wrote was the original lead developer for SQL Server. I was bizarrely high placed in that company. It was like just like a weird logistics anomaly where like they had a bunch of holes in the management instructor. So like I think I was like, it's like 4 people down from Bill at some point, which is just insane. Like I was a nobody there, but like if you looked at like an org chart, it looked like I was a big deal. And I got a cold call asking if I'd be interested in teaching. And my first inclination was no. I've never thought about teaching before or anything like that. But one of the big reasons why I ended up taking the meeting was remembering back to how good it made me feel to have somebody come back and say, hey, I got a job because of you. Hey, this was really, really helpful. This changed my life, kind of thing. And I found that to be monumentally beneficial. So, find local user groups in your area. That's a great way to find mentors, right? If you're somebody who is trying to learn stuff, if you're somebody who is obviously putting in effort by, reading books and attending, talks and asking questions, and then, learning stuff and volunteering to give talks or things like that yourself, people are going to notice, especially with these groups that have been around for a long time. A lot of the people who attend them are very senior at this point, and they have the ability to hire. Like if they come across somebody who's good and they're like the CIO now, and that happens a lot. People who start off in the engineering side of things oftentimes go to management, and if they're technical and they're smart and they're good and they're passionate about it, and a lot of the people who kind of go to these events and meetings are passionate, they end up being fairly highly placed. And if they see somebody who's really talented and who seems like they have a lot of prospects, even if they don't necessarily specifically have a role that's posted on things like job boards, sometimes they'll just kind of make a role. They'll say, you know what, like we don't necessarily need to have another junior sysadmin on this particular team, but we could, and it would be useful. And I think this person has really good potential for growth. So I'm going to go create that position and then see if I can go bring them on. That's not a unlikely thing to happen, even in times like this where there's pandemics, and recessions and bad economies. In fact, one of the things that you'll see is that a lot of times when these downturns happen, the big companies use this as an opportunity to poach talent from the smaller companies that are having a more difficult time surviving or have had to lay people off. Facebook, Microsoft, Google, all these companies are probably hiring out the wazoo right now because they know that there's basically a fire sale going on, right? They can get really talented people for not so much money because there's not as much competition, right? So leverage that. Apply to companies that you think that you may not be ready for, right? Apply to Google, apply to Facebook, apply to SpaceX, right? Apply to places that maybe you don't think that you would ordinarily be able to get into, and there's a good chance that you might, right? Also, there's a good chance that they're intentionally hiring lots of people right now. So, yeah, I wish I had a better way to say this is how you get through 2021. My hope is that we're going to have the vaccine. We're going to have things more or less start getting back to normal by the second half of 2021. But I think the first half is going to be kind of a continuation of the same. So we are going to have to try to get through it. But help other people. That'll help you. Put in the work, right? Learn as much as you can. Develop the skills that you think you need. And just keep pressing forward. Also, don't just complain about stuff. Take action, right? Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I'm sure that you have opinions on what the government, what we as a society should be doing. Reach out to your representatives, whether that's in the US or whatever country you live in. It does not take long to write an email. I have a group of friends that I get together with regularly. And the other night we were talking about, politics and what various different people felt the government should be doing. And I just asked, I was like, how many of you guys have actually contacted your representatives? And most of them hadn't. And it takes just a few minutes. So I know a lot of us feel frustrated with politics. A lot of us don't feel like things are going very well when it comes to the political institutions and the process. But, send a letter, write an email, make a phone call. Do everything within your power to do before you complain. And then once you feel like you've done everything within your power, then you are entirely justified to complain. But until you have, it's just, anyway, I'm getting off topic. But I hope you have a great 2021. I'm going to have to go watch this video back because I'm not sure that this is worth posting. I feel like it's been very rambly. But we'll see. I hope you have a great 2021. Thank you guys for watching. As I mentioned before, there's a number of new ways to watch the show. If you go to nicholasbernstein.com/show, I'll pull that up over here. You can see that the show is available on Odyssey, which is basically the new version of library.tv. Of course, you can still watch it on YouTube. There's the library app that you can get. And then there's also now a video RSS feed that you can go subscribe to. So if you would prefer to go use a podcatcher to go ahead and watch these, this is currently just videos. I'm very close to having this set up, so I'm going to go ahead and have MP3s automatically generated. and you'll be able to go ahead and download an audio only feed. But yeah, let me know if any of you guys are still here and still watching at this point, what you guys are doing to try to get through 2021 and make it as useful as possible. So have a great New Year's. Have a great 2021, if at all possible. Be good to each other. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.